Hey everyone, before we jump into today's episode, just wanted to come on here and let you all know that we are very appreciative of your support, and your support really has made a lot of difference with our community series, hearing from you all, writing in questions, engaging with our content more. It's made us feel like this is a real functioning community, which is very exciting for us because that's the goal here. We're looking to create valuable, insightful content for everyone who's listening to help improve their lives, whatever that means to them, because that is quite literally what we are doing. We are going out here, putting ourselves into uncertainty and trying to figure out there's got to be a way to live life that it is more present, it is more whole, it is more complete, it is more enjoyable. And we know that that always starts with us as people, as our perspective, as we are viewing the world. It starts with how we view the world. So that is what we're here doing. We're trying to change the world in that way by changing ourselves and by changing the perceptions of our listeners of how they view themselves, of how they view the world, of how they view their thoughts. And it's really exciting stuff. And we thank you for being here and listening to this, because it's not easy work. It's not easy stuff to listen to this kind of conversation, because it's very easy to avoid these things for our entire lives. So want to say thank you if you are listening, if you've been a listener for a long time, or if you're getting into listening to us. We really appreciate it. It makes a huge difference in just seeing the numbers go up. It's all very exciting because we just want to create a community that we are impacting people, because that allows us to impact ourselves. And want to also just say on that note that we have revamped our Patreon. So if you are someone who does find our content valuable, if you feel that we offer any kind of value to your life and you are interested in giving us a small monthly donation, we would love you to consider it if you're in a place where you can do that and feel like you want to do that. So we have different models, different tiers, but basically we have 2 tiers right now. You can go in and give us $3 a month. With that, you're going to get access to, on top of our weekly community Zoom, a second community Zoom where others who are part of this tier are going to be able to participate in this conversation. You're going to also be able to look back at the past recorded community Zooms on our Patreon. So you'll have access to that. They really end up being like little mini podcasts with other guests who are involved. So that is something that you'll get on top of that. If you feel the desire to contribute more because you want to, the other tier 2 is $10 a month, and you'll get access to everything I just said. And on top of that, you'll also get a third community Zoom, so we can chat and we can find a time that works for you. In addition to that, you'll also get a 30-minute conversation with either Sophie or I on a monthly basis. So these are things for you to consider if you feel like this is truly impactful for you, and we would love to hear from you. If that's the case, check out our Patreon. We will link it below, and enjoy today's episode. Thank you for being here always, and enjoy the episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to Life Unpotted. This is Sophie here. Thank you for joining us today. We have an insightful conversation for you guys because we're reflecting, we're processing, we're really experiencing what it means to go through change, to be healing, to be questioning everything in your life and asking yourself the question of, what have I been doing the past 30 years? What have I been doing all this time? How did I get to the point I am now? And looking around in your life and realizing you haven't been living your truth. You haven't been really living the life you want to live. And that's a realization we had a few years ago, but it's a continuous realization, right? I think it's important to recognize on this journey that we do have these huge insights. And for us, that was we left our career, we moved, and we're in a new city now. But it doesn't stop, right? Like, you don't just get to the new city, you don't just leave the job, or you don't leave the relationship or do the external thing and just arrive somewhere and you're set. I think growth and healing is not linear, and we're going to constantly be going through stages of feeling very, very intense emotions. And what I find so fascinating about this journey is that what happens when you start to become the observer of your thoughts and your emotions,
you're able to separate yourself from them. So what I've been experiencing recently, like the past few days, is very, very intense emotions coming up. And it's almost like I'm like thrown back to 2 years ago or a year ago. And it's almost like I'm in that situation again. And it does remind me of when we've taken psychedelic mushrooms and kind of how like mushrooms surface all of these feelings you've suppressed your whole life. And the other day I had a really interesting experience where I noticed these very, very scary emotions come up of feeling like I'm going to get abandoned or feeling like no one likes me or no one cares about me and all of these really scary feelings. And I kind of just watched it. I went into my room, I put my phone away, and I literally laid on my bed for 2.5 hours, just letting this intense feeling process. And it was a really crazy experience, honestly. I think it might have been the most connected I've ever felt to an experience without reacting to it. And I think it really showed what it meant to let your feelings process, to not react, to let them arise, let the anger arise, let the sadness arise, and sit in it. And I think this has been deepening for me because I had a very insightful therapy session a few weeks ago where I felt like I tapped back into my body and just wanted to kind of bring that up and just remind us all that a lot of this process requires us to sit through. And that is a very uncomfortable place to be in because you almost are looking back at yourself and saying, I can't believe I ever felt these things. I can't believe I ever reacted this way, or why are these feelings coming up so intensely if I don't want to live this life anymore. So I think just to start off the episode is just the reminder that growth is not linear. You're gonna feel so many different feelings, and I think what happens is this continuous awareness of continuing to become aware of all the thoughts and emotions that have been inside of you your whole life. And it's a process. It's a uncomfortable process. It's a frustrating process. But ultimately, when we allow this process to unfold, we are freeing ourselves from the feelings that have been controlling us our whole life.
And we don't have to judge ourselves for feeling these feelings or judging ourselves for observing ourselves feeling. We don't have to judge ourselves at all. And I think it's really easy to judge ourselves when we allow ourselves to be soft or we allow ourselves to go through these things. I think a lot of our suffering comes out of us judging ourselves when it comes to quite literally anything that we're doing. And I think going back to the theme of change, of changing your life and kind of jumping into another way of expressing yourself and living your life, and the way you view life, your entire worldview kind of is changing, kind of what we're both individually going through in that way of like going from living the very standard traditional trajectory within working an intense job within New York City to peeling back a lot of those layers and questioning productivity, questioning the need to make more and more money, the questioning of all this. I think as we're doing all of that, it can be very easy with that background, that mindset, to judge ourselves with every little thing that we do. Like from the moment we wake up in the morning, judging ourselves that we are podcasting, or judging ourselves for every little detail, like to not even get into it. I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you've been in experiences where you wake up and your mind is just racing. And I feel like that happens quite often for me. And I think the progression of making these big changes in our lives can lead us to feel quite uncertain about the direction that we are going in, which can cause us to have a lot of anxiety or racing thoughts. And that can become exhausting if we aren't able to find the space between recognizing those anxious thoughts and jumping into solving them, of finding that space in between those two things to just relax into whatever you're feeling and whatever that is. Because the truth of the matter is, we might think, oh, I can't feel spread out until I live in a house, or I can't have time to myself until I have a bigger space to live in. All of these bullshit lies we tell ourselves, when in reality, that's not the case. If you're getting your needs met, you might think, oh, but my life will be so much better if I had a yard I could walk out to. My life would be so much better if I did that. But the reality is, it's not going to be better then. You'll have more responsibilities with that. And that's not the point. The point is that you will still be the same person experiencing that. And I think jumping to the idea of like, oh, having a house will fix everything, it forgets the idea that we are always the ones that are experiencing these different experiences. And oftentimes it's actually not going to be an external force that's going to make us happy. It's what is underneath that of, why can't I relax into what I'm feeling right now? And why do I have to project that onto being able to have a house, or being able to have a different situation, of being able to do that? Because that's just trying to guarantee any level of certainty as, oh, I'll be happy once I have a house. And that's just not the case. And I think that's a dangerous place to live, because the reality is that that's not living for the now. And I think what I've learned from that realization, I was thinking, oh, Sophie and I, we live in this apartment. It's the space underneath the doors is like 2 inches. Like, there's always noises. There's always this. There's always that. This is so hard because yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. Like, we need more space, this and that. And it's like, no, like, that is not the answer. Because fast forward 5 years, you have a house. Okay, you have more space. Well, now it's just the next thing. It's like, oh, well, I actually want to move in this mortgage and I can't sell because there's construction next door and there's this and there's that. And it's always going to be something else. And for me in that moment, I sat through the discomfort of thinking, oh, like, this apartment, it can't get a certain level of clean. Oh, it can't do this. It can't do that. And I didn't let it impact me. And I just sat through it. And I was like, wow, that's freedom. Freedom is right now, realizing no matter what the circumstances, allowing myself to sit in the uncertainty of everything. That's what allows us to enjoy ourselves in this very moment.
Yeah, I've been going through this so much. And I think it's interesting, again, like highlighting the fact that when we're growing, we are going to experience certain mind, thought tendencies we've had. One of those, clearly for both of us, and I think for many of us, is thinking that we will be happier when we get something else. And I think it's really interesting to go deeper on it, right? So you start feeling uncomfortable and you don't realize that maybe you do realize you're not feeling good. Like, I've been going through this of just being like, I don't feel great. So my mind starts going down this loop of, is it the apartment? Is the apartment too small? I need to get new clothes. Yeah, let me get new clothes. Oh, or should I? What is it? Oh, right. I didn't really like the breakfast I had this morning.
Or I'm bloated. Oh my God, I need to work out because I feel like gross and I am gross. So my skin is crawling and I need to work out. And that's the solution. I'm going to plan a workout for every day this week. And that's going to make me feel better because once I'm doing that, I'm not going to be fat. And I'm going to be skinny and I'm going to be muscular and I'm going to be da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
It doesn't stop.
It does not stop.
It never stops. And I think that's exactly it, though. I think what we're doing in these scenarios is we're trying to do everything we can to change the feeling we're experiencing. We are trying to do everything we can to not allow ourselves to sit through what is inevitably fucking discomfort. And I think a huge realization I'm having the past few days is that no matter what you have in life, no matter whether you're pursuing your passions, no matter where you live, no matter what job you have, we're not going to feel good all the time. I think that is the inevitable truth of life. And I think, so then the question arises, so what do I do knowing this? What do I do knowing I'm not going to feel good all the time? I think we really have to go deeper and change that definition of good. Change this idea of, oh, I should feel motivated every single morning, or I should feel so energized every morning. And if I feel kind of tired and if I feel whatever, I don't feel a certain way and I just want to lay on the couch, or that's okay. Like, why are we so rigid about needing to maintain a very consistent feeling state for so often? And Daisy, like I experienced this yesterday when we were driving. I was going to say upstate New York, but we were not. We're not. We were just driving to Fredericksburg, Texas. And I'm like, my hormones are racing, just like not feeling good. And I noticed in the past, I would have been like, I want to get a drink of alcohol, or I want to get a coffee, or I want to go get a donut, or I want to get something to make me feel good. And I remember vividly having those moments, like I would be hungover and I would just feel awful. And I almost would feel like I'd run out of dopamine. Like I just couldn't feel good. And I would keep trying to feel good, but I couldn't feel good. And I think realizing that, like I said to myself yesterday, like just let yourself sit through it. Like I have my period right now, and I think it's extra hard when that happens because I inevitably just don't feel good. But the acceptance has to come in to go, this is temporary. Like our life is composed of moments that are constantly fleeting. And the more that you continue to say, I don't want to feel this, let me change this, versus let me just sit in this, the easier it becomes because you're not trying to change what you're experiencing.
I think it's interesting about what you said about productivity, of why have we created such a rigid way of this. And I wonder if it has something to do with finding certainty in that, equating rigidity with certainty. Because think about it, when you are on the treadmill of working 9 to 5 or working 9 to 9, like these intense jobs that are common, to be realistic, they are very common to work very intense jobs where you have no time for yourself. You have hardly any time for your loved ones. Like this can be a reality where you really forget what it means to be alone with your thoughts. And those two things are kind of opposite. And you can kind of start to find meaning in the certainty of knowing that you're going to get rewarded at the end of the month because you hit quota. So all of this stress and all of this unnatural, forceful energy of trying to do something is worth it for that. Or maybe you are just in a place where you feel like that's the only option. I don't know if that really related to what you were saying, but I think when it came to like the dopamine of like, we have a limited amount of dopamine, it makes me reflect on the way that I showed up within my corporate job, because I'm very understanding that it's never necessarily what it is, whether it's a job, whether it's a substance, it's never that alone. It's how we are using it. So someone can work a job and another person can too. And one person can have an unhealthy relationship to it and use it as a coping mechanism, as a way to avoid everything else in their life. Same with coffee, same with alcohol. The flip is true as well. Someone can be totally whole and complete in themselves and realize that they don't need to escape, realize they don't need this to change their life, to avoid how they're feeling, and they can just enjoy it for what it is. So I think that's a really interesting thing that I reflect on, because the way I look at jobs that I was in the past is that I was never doing it in a healthy manner. I was looking to get my self-value or my self-worth from it. And just to like answer that question of what my opinion is of maybe possibly why people find such rigidity in their day-to-day lives is because they don't trust themselves. They're looking to get their value from some other place, and they can't just sit with the uncertainty, because what we're going through, we are sitting through the uncertainty, and it's very uncomfortable of questioning, like on a random day, random Tuesday, you wake up and you're like, what the hell am I doing? But then you wake up on Thursday after sitting through that for 2 days and being like, right, I'm on top of the world. It doesn't matter. I'm creating my own journey. No one else has to understand. Many people will, many people won't. But it's never them. It's always just you, because it's scary to be in uncertainty. It's never what anyone else is saying. It's always just you and your experience. So I think that really just goes in par with what you were saying of the difficulty that it comes to sit through things. It can be very uncomfortable, but the insights, the joy, the happiness, it's always on the other side of that. And we can't live a life where all we have is dopamine. And sure, we live in a society where we can go on TikTok, we can go on Instagram, we can walk 5 minutes or drive 5 minutes and go get a coffee. We can use all of these things as a distraction. But I think the exciting thing is that these things don't have to be used as a distraction. When we actually do take the time for ourselves to sit through uncomfortable things, we can actually enjoy these things for what they are versus using them in an unhealthy way.
Yeah, I think that makes it clear why it is so inherently difficult to sit through life and to sit through these experiences, because it is uncertain. And I personally didn't realize how much I cling to uncertainty in my life until we made these big changes. And again, I really want to make it clear that it's not about the job. It's not about all these other things, the external things. It's this internal state that we are constantly living in, right? Like going back to the basics. We experience this life through our mind. We experience this life through our own perspective, through the opinions we have, through the preferences we have, through the ideas we have of what is good, what is bad, what this means, what this doesn't mean. And ultimately, it's a recognition that your ability to enjoy this life comes down to you. It's just you. And what does that mean? It means becoming aware of all of the shit that keeps you from really appreciating life. And I think the biggest barrier to that for all of us is this giant fear of uncertainty. Because going back to this experience I had a few days ago where I was just overcome with all these emotions, and I went into the room, I put my phone down, I'm intentionally decided I'm not gonna go on my phone right now because I don't feel good. I'm not gonna use Instagram or TikTok to just open my phone because I don't feel good. I've done that so many times. And what I'm really doing when I'm doing that is looking for something to distract me from letting this feeling state unfold. So why do we not want to sit in the feeling state? Because it's uncertain. We're so not used to just letting our bodies sit through the emotion, like letting the emotion come up and letting it pass. And what happens is like let's just go back to the example. Like you start feeling really anxious and you're sitting on the couch and you're feeling really anxious. So you grab your phone and then you start scrolling. Or you're in the car driving home and you're feeling really uncomfortable because you had too much caffeine and you're feeling really jittery. And you pick up your phone because you want that safety net. Like you want something to grab to say, oh, I'm okay now. But what we don't realize when we're doing that is that that's not a safety net. Yeah, it might feel good for a very short period of time, but what you're really doing is not allowing yourself to sit through it. And then what happens, and this is what I'm reflecting, like I used to live my life like this for months and months of that ball of anxiety. I would just live in it because I never gave myself the chance to feel through it. And it just shows the importance of, yes, life is continuously, we're in this body with hormones and there's chemicals and synapses going on in our brain that maybe we don't quite understand. But the reality of it is things are going to keep coming up. We're going to be in situations where we don't really love the way we're feeling. And I just think that it is the intentionality, it is that space we find in those moments to say, okay, I am not going to avoid this. I am not going to try to numb myself. I'm not just going to try to make myself feel better. The answer isn't feeling better. The answer is letting yourself feel that discomfort. Because guess what? You'll feel better so much faster. Because the insights will come, the clarity will come. And that's what happened to me this weekend where I was laying on the bed and I just started processing like, oh, like I remember this feeling from when I was 15 of feeling rejected. And it was like my mind and body were playing out as if I was at 15 again. And basically what I did is I processed it. And it just shows how, and of course it makes sense now when we're on this journey of healing all this shit from our younger years. And we're starting to, it's like you see those patterns you used to do play out now of avoiding. Like, of course, there's so much shit that we have to heal from our younger years, because that is that exact tendency that we didn't do. We didn't allow ourselves to do when we were younger. We didn't know how to do it. We didn't know how to feel through the pain or feel through the uncomfortability. So what then happens later in life? You keep doing it. You're avoiding. And that, I think, is what builds the accumulation of pain. That is what builds the things we have to then heal, instead of letting yourself heal in real time. So I think the takeaway kind of from that point is like, we have to learn kind of how to let ourselves continuously heal in life, meaning we keep processing things in real time as they're happening. We sit through the uncomfortability, we sit through the emotion. And I think when we're doing that, it comes in and it comes out, and we're free from it, instead of letting it store in our body and letting it stay there for so long. So it just comes down to accepting and being like that, the river, and letting the water just flow. We have to just let the water flow throughout our life. And the more we pause, the more we grab, the more we say, I don't like this feeling, the more we fall back into those old patterns of what got us here in the first place.
Well, it's interesting as you say that, because that's the space that we learn. That's the space where we realize, like, for example, something I used to freak out about when I was younger, like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more recently, I don't know, was I would be really bloated, and my mind would race of like, I need to change my diet. I need to work out. I need to do all of these things. When maybe the lesson was to be learned from just sitting through the discomfort of being bloated versus trying to go and get more stressed about finding ways to solve it. Maybe the lesson to be learned is when we're actually experiencing the discomfort. Maybe that's the point. And I think back to middle school or high school specifically, especially with sports, like when you have to do, I hate the word suicides, but like when you'd get in trouble with sports, for me, I feel like they'd make you do the run. Like you'd touch one line and then another line and run back and run this and back and forth. And like when you'd get punished, like you just want to get it over with, versus sitting through and thinking about, what did I do wrong there? It's like, oh, just get on with it and move on to the next thing. Like I feel like, or if I did it badly on a test, if I failed a test, and it's like instant fear. Am I going to fail the class? Am I going to be held back? Am I going to I don't know, like just like the kind of stuff that happens with the rigidity of it, of like, there's so much fear about what the discomfort may lead to in terms of holding us back from being able to propel forward, because we have to work within this narrow system to achieve success, that it was so fear-based that it was difficult to actually sit through the uncomfortable emotions. And with those uncomfortable emotions, the answers are always in sitting through them. But I feel like hearing you say this, and it's also something that I'm learning, that it's good to sit through these things versus escape them. I feel like it's a brand new thing that I'm learning. It feels brand new. And yeah, when we were like young kids, it's like, go take a time out. Okay, maybe that was the right approach. Like, think about these thoughts. I don't know, but I think as it progressed, it was always so fearful. I was always so fearful of being in the discomfort, because being in the discomfort meant I was failing. And I don't think that, I know that's not the right way to look at it. I know that my experience as of lately, I have felt the most free. I've had the most insights from not trying to change how I'm feeling. And I think that is where success comes from. Success, and just any type of success, of just enjoying your life. Because I think it's super easy for us to think that this grind mentality of success means we have to avoid feeling any discomfort altogether, when the most success you can have is from feeling through the discomfort, truly. And it's still mind-blowing to me, because I thought, like, when I started my first job, it's like, oh, you can never be uncomfortable. You always just have to show up great. So that means ignoring all of the feelings within yourself to show up, to be ready to crack numbers or crunch numbers or do whatever it is anyone needs you to do. And I'm just kind of mind blown by this a little bit, of how I never realized the power in sitting through the discomfort, because it was such a great fear of failing.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm thinking about, you go out into public arenas, you go out to stores, you go on a walk, and we don't see this anywhere. Like, what we see is we perceive people and it just looks like everyone's okay. It just looks like you see these people. I was thinking about recently, like, when you go interact in the world, what you're seeing is people who've left their houses, and you're seeing them in this very short period of time of going to the grocery store, or going to the airport, or you're seeing them kind of in transit somewhere. Like, we never really see people, or people in the public really, doing these kind of things. Like, I'm trying to explain it. Like, we just see people in action. We see people buying things. We see people drinking coffee. We see external.
So you mean you don't really see people living their life?
Meaning we don't see people processing things. We don't see people.
The full spectrum of the human experience.
We don't see what it means to have the whole spectrum of human experience, which what you learn from taking mushrooms is because the whole concept of sitting through, not resisting, accepting, and then repeat is just life. Like, that is life. Like, you're always going to be sitting through shit. And we were listening to Dualistic Unity, one of our friends' podcasts, yesterday when we were driving home, and our friend Andrew was talking about just how, like, you have no idea what any of this means. You have no idea when you're going through all these uncomfortable emotions, like, if you escape from it and avoid it, you're not giving yourself the chance to get the insights that are going to teach you about yourself. That are going to teach you about these tendencies that you normally would fall back into.
Well, I think the podcast has been an exceptional forum for that, because it's so often that I'll be coming into a conversation and I'll be halfway through the conversation and I think that it's a shit conversation. But I don't know that it's a shit conversation. Maybe I'm just judging it. And if I reject feeling that discomfort of maybe this is an awful fucking conversation and no one will like it and no one will enjoy it, if I don't allow myself to sit through that and just sit with it and continue to work through it and show up and try, that means that I will make it a shit conversation, because I will give up and I will get in between myself and just being able to, maybe it takes the 30 minutes until you get to a good point of an interesting point. That's the whole point of having a conversation, is to get to a place that is interesting. And it's that, as opposed to like completely shutting down and just saying, fuck this, I'm like over it. Like that is guaranteed to get you somewhere. And that's certainty. And it's greater uncertainty to remain open and to say, maybe this is a shit conversation, but maybe it's not. And the difference there is being able to sit through the possibility that it is. And what does that say about you if it is a shit conversation? What does it really actually mean? Well, hold up. Why am I putting so much pressure onto this one conversation? What's beneath that? Why is that the case? So I think it's a great forum to understand for life, for every moment, to being an adult and having to do adult things like pay bills and call your credit card company if there's fraud, or like all these things that like we are like, I don't want to do that, or your boss is calling you and you don't want to do that. But it's like, is it really that? Or is there just something beneath that you are experiencing, that this is making you sit with whatever is within you that you've been avoiding because you've been doing all avoidant things all weekend? And when you get a call from your boss on Sunday, Are you really pissed that you have to go through and look at something on your email? Or are you pissed that you have to stop avoiding all of the discomfort of the random shit for whatever reason that you're feeling? And that's really interesting.
I want to say two things. Number one, I really resonate with that. I've actually was experiencing that earlier today of like, oh, I had to do things. Oh, tasks. And my mind starts being like, I don't want to do that. And it reminds me of like Sunday scaries I used to get before work of like, oh, my mind starts telling me there's so many things I have to do. And I start thinking about all those things I have to do. And I get anxious because I'm like, those require work. I have to work. And I used to be so scared of working for this reason.
But is working just the fear of not avoiding yourself?
It's relaxation. It's what it means is really you're clinging on so much to thinking. Like, I think what this really is like when you have those moments where you really are starting to fear everything in your life and you're starting to be scared of everything in your life, it just shows that you've been caught up thinking so much about what's happening.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like think of the Sunday scaries, what you just said. The fear there is not the fact that tomorrow's Monday, but it's the fact that your thoughts are going rampant and you're afraid to separate yourself from the thoughts and just sit with the feelings. Because I experienced this. When I woke up this morning, my mind was instantly racing with so many things, so many fear thoughts, so many things I had to do. And it's easy in those moments to say, oh, I'm going to check my phone. Do I have any texts? But going back to what I said earlier in the conversation of being able to create space between the anxious, excessive thoughts and action is what allows you to just kind of sit with those and realize, okay, the worst of sitting through those, the first 15 minutes of just sitting with them and saying, okay, I'm observing these is the hardest part, but also you don't have to bring the state that you're currently in into everything you're going to do that day. Just because you have to pay rent today doesn't mean you have to wake up and do it right now, right? You can say, oh, right, I have to do that, but I'm not going to do that in this moment because I'm going to take time for myself before I do that so that I'm creating space between all the anxiety I have around that and actually doing it, because realizing that it's never actually that. It's just total uncertainty. And now the more that I think about this, it makes me question, why is anything uncomfortable? Nothing is inherently uncomfortable. It's just us. And this makes me think back to college or work of like, oh, you have this assignment due in 2 days and being so anxious. That assignment inherently is not anxiety ridden. It's why is it so anxiety ridden for you? And the interesting thing is that oftentimes the answer is not going to be found in you necessarily doing that task, but it's going to be found, I think, in you doing nothing and facing whatever it is that is so anxiety ridden separately from projecting it onto that task. I'm just wondering, why do we live our lives in extreme anxiety all the time? Like, I'm really seeing that. I mean, I've spent most of my life in extreme anxiety and discomfort and fear. It's like, why do we do that? And why is the only safe haven to find distraction? Why can't we find happiness within the discomfort and ease and true relaxation of being able to truly be present, right? To be able to sit with a friend and enjoy the coffee together presently in each other's space and say, yeah, there's some stressful stuff going on in my life, but to not be bringing that stress and anxiety into that moment. Like, why can't we do that? And then the other, I think, way of living life is like, or way that I've lived a life is just avoiding everything altogether and just finding distractions, whether it's like watching shows, watching TV, being on the internet, taking the same example of coffee, but using it as a way to try to change your state, right? It's always just us in our experience. So you can slow down. You can slow down no matter what the situation is that you're in. You can slow down and realize there's no threat right now. There's no imminent threat facing you. You're not going to get your head eaten off by a bear if you take some deep breaths, or not even if you just sit through what you're feeling. Like, I'm just kind of processing right now. Why do we spend our entire lives? Why do we waste our entire lives feeling so anxious and fearful when we don't have to? We choose to. Why do we do that?
It's so fascinating because I feel like you're having the same insight I'm having right now. Like in this moment of I was anxious when we started podcasting this, I think I was kind of anxious.
Same. Here, I'll give you the thought. Okay. We didn't record last Thursday because we were traveling and a lot of stuff was just happening. So we didn't get to record. And that's the first time we have not hit record like we said we were going to in a year. We have showed up consistently for an exact year. And this was the second episode. So we still have never missed the first episode, but we hit pause, whatever. But there is a certain cadence and a certain momentum that builds from having 2 episodes a week. We've been doing that. We didn't have that last week. It was a holiday. We recorded prior, all this stuff. None of that even really is applying, just kind of painting the scene, but realizing we're kind of rusty, realizing, forgetting, am I podcasting? Wait, if this podcast isn't good, does that mean that everything that I'm doing is bad, is wrong? If this podcast right now is bad, does that mean that I should hate my life and myself because I'm making the wrong decisions? If I'm making this question, if I'm jumping into this space of uncertainty of saying, I'm going to try to find other ways to make money and podcast while doing it to try to let go of all the ideas and concept I've ever held of myself. If this podcast isn't the best thing I've ever heard, I'm failing and I should be miserable because I'm not succeeding and moving forward and changing. Like, I think that is kind of what I was feeling going into this podcast. Beneath kind of like the example I gave is kind of what was beneath the need to be making sure this podcast is really great, because it's so hard to be in that uncertainty. Because when we're in uncertainty, when we're taking a chance on ourselves, we don't know, is this going to be fucking awful? Or is it going to be really good? Or is it going to be average? But does any of that really matter? Is that us, instead of being in this moment, actually enjoying this moment? Does it mean that we are actually looking at this as a means to an end to find our value, just the same way that I did with every career I was ever in? I never was present or could never be enjoying what I was actually doing because I was so fearful, meaning, what is this going to say about me if it's bad? Like, it's the same damn mentality. And it's crazy that we spend our entire lives not living in this moment because we're so fearful that if we live in this moment, we're not going to be enough because the outcome of what we're doing isn't going to be enough. So,
holy shit. I just feel like I'm like landing back to life a little bit. Like I'm coming back to life.
Well, that's the point of this podcast. The point of this podcast for us is to, no matter how much discomfort there is, it's to just keep taking the next step forward, no matter what the discomfort is, because that is a metaphor for how we should be living life. Of instead of just giving up on ourselves because it's uncomfortable, it's like, well, what's the next step going to lead you to? Bliss? Like, that's the point of life, is to keep walking no matter how uncomfortable it is, because who knows what we can discover within our own minds? Who knows what we can discover about how to live our lives if we don't just keep pushing and pushing and pushing against the wall that's enclosing on us? We have to keep going.
But that's why it's so freaking important to keep doing uncomfortable things. And I think it shows. I really do think taking a break from podcasting last week, like I'm finding myself in patterns that I haven't felt since I was in college. And I don't think it's just from that, but I think it's really interesting. I think these patterns are now cycling through because we have the awareness and we're experiencing, and it's like, wow, that example you gave of the freaking assignment, like you have the intense anxiety and there's no gap to perceive it. There's no gap to experience it apart from you. You become it. Like, you think you're the anxiety, because there's just no gap for you to see otherwise. And that's the fucking life I used to live.
Oh my God. And it's so easy to fall back into that.
I fell back into that today, and I'm seeing it. Of like fear. Oh my God, I don't want to clean the dishes. I'm scared. Fear, anxiety, everything is wrong.
What is that? Why do we choose to live our lives?
Up in our minds, and I think the ultimate thing is the fear of death. I do think that. But I think what's physically happening is we're thinking so much and we're not experiencing. And now I'm remembering that there was a point I never would have understood what that meant. Because I would say, what do you mean everything makes me anxious? What do you mean I cannot feel anxious? What do you mean, Sophie? What are you saying? And wow, clarity is coming to me right now of the importance of doing things in life that cultivate a space between you and your thoughts.
Okay, so it's the idea of when we go on vacation, we can wake up and we can relax and we don't have to worry about anything. But why can't we take that mentality into our everyday life, even if we have to get woken up by our kids and then take them to practice and do this and do that and make dinner? Why can't we enjoy that? Why does it have to be stressful?
Because you're in a stressful state.
Why do we have to live our lives that way? Why do we live our lives that way?
We're scared of something.
What are we afraid of?
Death, I think.
How is that comprehensible?
Because it's the most inevitable thing we ever will experience. And we wake up, and from the time we're born, we know we're going to die at some point, but we don't face it, and we avoid it, and we avoid it, and we keep avoiding it.
So how does that play into a day-to-day experience of like, oh, I'm stressful, it's Sunday, I have to have a conversation with my boss on Tuesday, and I don't know how it's going to go?
Because fear gets disproportionate. Fear gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden, you're so scared of your self-worth because what happens if you're not valuable? It all comes down to the fear of death, I really believe. Because we're living in the fucking illusion. We're not actually saying, oh my God, I'm alive. Holy shit, I'm breathing.
We become so afraid to live that we actually never live.
Yes.
But what do you have to lose at that point if you can recognize that? What do you have to lose? And it's interesting, Sophie, because when so many people, I feel like when I've seen in movies, when I've seen in movies, when people get like a life-altering diagnosis where they realize they have 4 months to live. Why is it just then that the way they view life changes? Why does that wake them up? Is it because the fear of death is now certain? They say, oh, this is on the table now. This is going to happen. So why am I going to fear about anything else?
Because I have to actually face it. But that's what's always happening.
Because you have limited time. But we always have limited time. There's no difference between that example and you right now. Because you never know when you actually may have no time left.
Exactly.
So why would you ever be stressed or anxious or fearful other than when you're in the car and it's hanging off the side of the road, and that's when you are stressed. That's when you get out of it,
I think it's because life as we know it is uncertain. You don't know when you're going to die. You don't know when you're going to die. And I have vivid memories, Daisy, of being 6 years old and being in my room and looking up to the ceiling and this wave of fear coming into my stomach of being like, there's a time where I won't be here. And I remember making the decision. I said, I used to have nightmares about dying. I've been remembering this recently. Nightmares where I'd wake up and be like, oh, I'm alive. Thank God. Thank God. And I remember making the point to myself where I said, you don't have to worry about this yet. Worry about this when you're older. Worry about this when you're older. Okay. I'm 25. I'm anxious about death. Worry about this when you're older. You don't have to face it. Oh, my grandma dies. Oh, I don't have to face it. Worry about it when you're older. Keep worrying about it when you're older. But that's in you. That deep fear of what the fuck happens when I'm not here anymore and one day I won't be here. And that is something we walk around terrified with. But we live in an illusion.
But it's interesting because once we face that, and there's probably different levels of facing that. Once we are able to, I think, have conversations like this where we can unpack it, right? Unpack why. Why do we have to be so stressed and anxious? And unpack what's underneath all of that. We can kind of get an idea of like, oh, it's just because we don't know what there is ahead of us. And if I can accept that and say, right, nothing is guaranteed except for this exact moment. If tomorrow isn't guaranteed, Instead of trying to force tomorrow to be guaranteed by being stressed about my mortgage and being stressed about my paycheck, instead of being stressed about the groceries and this and this and this, I can just say, tomorrow is not guaranteed. So fine, I'm going to enjoy right now because tomorrow is not guaranteed. Like, you can let go, right? You can kind of just be in this experience without the fear of tomorrow because nothing is guaranteed. This is kind of a new way of me looking at this.
But the fear of tomorrow is not actually what's going to happen tomorrow. And that is the whole point. Like, we start believing that what we're thinking is reality. We start believing that the idea of doing the test or the idea of giving the speech or the thoughts we're having about doing the dishes or the thoughts we're having about having to clean the apartment or having to figure all the shit out or not knowing, we're going deeper and deeper and deeper into our thoughts. And it's making me really realize in this moment of, oh my God, I spent so much of my life, literally the only experience in reality I had was my mind. I was never at peace because the stories got bigger. They kept getting bigger. The fear kept getting bigger. And what happens when we don't pop that freaking fear bubble? It goes and it grows and it doesn't stop and it compounds until you get the space where you go, holy shit, I'm not my thoughts.
And it's crazy because obviously we live in a world where it's like, okay, you graduate college or you graduate high school, time to get a job, time to get a 401k, start planning, start saving money for when you retire. You need to start be thinking about the future. Are you saving money for a house? Are you saving money for a family? Are you meeting someone to marry? Tomorrow, the future, tomorrow, the future. You know? So of course, when we have this brain and we're fed all of this, we're like fear. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can still plan for your future. You can still save money for a house. You can still go on dates to meet a spouse if that's what you want, if that's what you want. But that doesn't have to negate your ability to enjoy every second of this moment. You don't have to get your value from trying to find the next answer in the future. You can actually enjoy right now while also doing those things.
Imagine if our Earth that we were on, like if this planet that we were on, we talked about our existence and we didn't build this entire illusion that we're trying to do everything we can to say, oh, wait, hey, I'm going out to dinner with my friends. What do you guys think about the fact that we have consciousness? And what do you guys think about the fact that I'm alive and the Earth's been going for billions and billions of years and there's fish in the sea and there's animals and there's grass and there's trees and there's this entire ecosystem that works beautifully, conjunctively together. And I'm here and we have built things like cars and planes. And apparently one day I won't be here, but I don't really know for sure because I'm just viewing life through my mind, but I'm just viewing life through my brain. That can only perceive reality through a certain percentage because of our human brain is limited versus other levels of consciousness. But we can use things like psychedelics to expand that and to go, whoa, what is this? Instead of saying, hey, John, you get that fucking paycheck yet? Like, what? Like, I think this episode, what's happened, we started to wake up a little bit to the reality of life. Clearly, we were caught up in it the past few days or the past week, and I think, holy shit, I haven't had this level of clarity in a while, I think, but this is what happens, Daisy. When you don't have clarity, you don't know you don't have clarity. You only know you have clarity when you come out of it. So it just is so important to keep coming back to the moment, to keep remembering this is temporary. This experience in life is temporary. It's temporary. Yeah. It's none of this bullshit stories. It's just a story that you're telling yourself. It's not what's really happening. If you really want to go see what's happening, go look at the fucking trees. Go. And yes, someone will come back and say, well, I have bills to pay. I have all this shit to pay. Yeah, you do. But you don't have to pay it stressed. You don't have to keep feeding and feeding into the illusion. You can actually partake in the illusion, but you can do it relaxed. And you can have a lot of freaking fun at it.
And you can enjoy it.
And you can realize it's all a game.
Oh my
the
God.
Game of life.
I think I'm realizing this in a different level right now.
Okay, yeah. So you're having like that kind of like psychedelic realization.
I don't even know really what that means. I just know that like I'm having a full body realization that we don't ever have to be stressed. We choose to be stressed because the actual percentage that we need to be stressed in order to save our lives. When was the last time you were even in an incident like that where you were getting chased by a bear? Never. So it's disproportionate. It's so disproportionate to how we actually live our lives. And we don't have to sulk in misery. Like we can, this is our longest episode yet, by the way. We just hit 1 hour. Good combo. And
just shows like you process as you go. Let yourself time to process. Give yourself time to process.
Well, it also makes me realize like why I've resisted this conversation. Felt so angry towards you in the past with this conversation because it was my unwillingness to be in the discomfort. And I would look at you and be like, oh, you're the one who's bringing this up. That's overwhelming to me. This is too much. You're the problem. It's you. So it's interesting to see that it's really just our unwillingness to be uncomfortable, because on the other side of that discomfort is connection, meaning, presence.
Welcome to the other side, Daisy. Happy to have you here. Recognizing you don't have to be stressed. No, but look, I think you're having like realizations right now about these kind of things, of realizing you don't have to be stressed. You don't have to be anxious. That's a choice.
Yeah. And I even feel, with all that being said, I still feel an urgency to be like, okay, we need to close this conversation out. But it's like, where does that come from? Why would we need to do that?
The idea that an episode should only be an hour, like, let's keep talking. Like, why stop it? I think it's the pressure we put on ourselves of needing it to be a certain way. I feel like when we first started, I definitely was like not letting myself just talk. It's so easy. Like, it's really easy to fall back. And I do think if there's anything, like, my biggest takeaway from this conversation so far is that you have to let yourself do things. I can envision myself 3 years ago being like, oh, I want to start a podcast. Oh, I want to move. I want to leave my job. And literally being crippled with anxiety of saying, how will I ever do any of that? How will I ever do any of that? Like, I can't even pick up my laptop to read my email for work because I'm paralyzed in fear. And it just, the illustration of keep taking steps every single day. Take small steps. Take steps every moment. Every moment, take a step. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what will happen tomorrow. You don't know what your capabilities are. You don't know what you're capable of. And if you keep listening to the thoughts that tell you this is going to be really bad, or you're never able to do that, or if you leave your job, it's going to be awful, or if you start posting on social media, you're going to get exiled. You have to keep going forward. You have to challenge your beliefs. You have to question your beliefs and say, I'm not listening to them. And always remember, there's always another perspective to take besides the one that your thoughts are giving you in this moment.
Wow. You don't have to listen to your thoughts.
This is what it means.
You don't have to listen to them.
So we just went through what that actually means, because it could be a very concept that we say, right? Don't listen to your thoughts, but that's what it means. It means you're not that anxiety. It's always going to come up, but you're safe. Okay, calm down. Like, we're okay.
So it's like, oh, you actually don't need to make that extremely big paycheck to be happy. Sure, that'd be great. But you're not going to find presence in that. You're not going to find peace in that. You may find stability in that. But if you're already in a place where you're stable with your current paycheck, getting to a paycheck 2 times that or 3 times that, you're not going to find presence like you can in this moment.
And it's like what you said, the thought that I had halfway through the episode, is this episode bad? You start having that thought enough times and observing the thought enough times to go, oh, that's the same freaking thought that tells me the bear is chasing me. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't
And it's
mean
crazy
anything.
because if you actually believe it, it becomes true. Because you take it seriously
Exactly.
and you say, oh, I'm going to give up because this episode is shit. And I think we're at a point in the episode where I can say, this was a meaningful episode for me. I would say it was a good episode. But there was a point in this episode where I was like, oh, I don't know. It's not good. It's not good. But it's like, I just hadn't let go. It's because I was just thinking. I was thinking.
This podcast is literally a meditation. It's the process that we do in life of continuously letting go, not knowing what's going to happen, and then realizing the idea we had about how something was going is never what actually unfolds. I actually can't think of one time. I can't think of one time where what I thought was going to happen was actually what happened. Can you? Like, and most of the time that was always distorted of gray, of bad. It's going to be really bad. I'm going to be really anxious. I'm going to be really nervous. I won't be able to do
Well, I think Sunday is an interesting day of like thinking back to like your past several Sundays, and was the fear ever relevant that you were having leading up into the next day? Did you really need to be stressed about going to the grocery store? Is that what's palpable in the air? Is the stress of others? I don't know. I think it's really just like challenging this. And even in the past 10 minutes, I felt myself go in and out of this to an extreme level of like feeling the extreme fear and anxiety and watch it go away and falling into it. Like it's that, I don't want to say like nefarious, but like it's like that sneaky. It's sneaky.
You're walking on a very thin line. But I think what happens is that the more you continuously reprogram your mind to not go down those patterns, you become more aware of it. And when you are caught up in something, you start going, it's the opposite, right? You start going, oh, this feels unfamiliar to feel reactive. This feels unfamiliar for me to feel so anxious. This feels so weird for me to be scared of everything. I don't normally feel this way anymore. Because you start shifting and you no longer feel that way. So what happens is that the base state where you once had a base state of every day you're anxious, then the days start switching. Now, most days you're relaxed. Most days you're okay. Most days you're enjoying life. And then every now and then you'll get that boom feeling of, whoa, I feel like I'm attaching to things. I feel like I'm clinging. I feel like I'm feeling really anxious. And what I'm having another realization is that it's not even, it's not actually, like there's two different things here, right? There's like what I noticed what I was doing today, it's that fear of, I can't handle the week. It's that bigger fear. And I think what I'm realizing, I haven't had that in a very long time. What I've had recently is just a reality of feeling uncomfortable feelings, but I didn't have the other thing, which is creating a story and living so deeply in my mind of thinking all these things and being so scared to do everything. I haven't felt that way in, it feels like months of scared. And it just shows that like the other way of living, which is how we've been living, of just letting each day come up, letting the emotions come up and letting yourself go, that's just life. And in that moment, you maintain this consistent state of relaxation that no matter what happens, you're relaxed. So what happens when you switch over to the other end of it, you get caught up in your mind again. And then just remembering.
Well, if you're relaxed, there's no rush to get somewhere. Because if you're relaxed, you're not trying to escape or avoid the situation that you're in. You're just partaking in it. And what's so valuable about the next moment, if you can actually enjoy this moment? Does the value within the next few moments cease to be as valuable because you realize the most value is to be found in the present moment? And does that help you stay in this moment? Because you can't find this level of value in the future or in the past. It feels good to be here in this moment, despite the discomfort that may be there. You know that there's something so valuable and rewarding on the other side of that discomfort. And it's like you keep pushing instead of allowing yourself to go scroll on your phone, instead of allowing yourself to listen to your thoughts, your cyclical thoughts. You just sit with this moment. In this moment, it's uncomfortable, but it might just be 10 minutes of that being uncomfortable. Maybe in 30 minutes, you're going to be feeling like it's fucking Christmas morning, the way that you're able to be present in this experience with people around you, because that's how life works. And I think with things like social media and the internet and instant gratification, we've forgotten that. We've forgotten that lesson of like the beautiful oak tree in your front yard that's 10 feet tall. That didn't grow overnight. That didn't shade your tree. That didn't shade your house overnight. That didn't shade your living space overnight. It took time and time and time of the tree to grow in order for it to create something of value. And it probably wasn't comfortable because it didn't know where it was going. I don't know really, because I don't know much about trees in that regard. But I do know that things take time and we can't just give up on things because we're not feeling 100% good. And we can't try to fill ourselves with artificial dopamine as a supplement of the discomfort we're currently in. If we want to have the joy, if we want to have the excitement, if we want to have the presence, we have to be willing to sit through the mediocre discomfort of just being. And that's a norm that we've forgotten.
I'm ready to live a life not on my phone all the time. I think this is the realization for me is the past weekend I didn't go on my phone. Like I haven't really been on it, and something changes when I do that. Like I'm here. I'm allowing myself to actually experience life. And I'm not saying social media isn't great. I'm not saying, but it's like I want to shift my life so that most of what I'm experiencing is in reality. And I'm not constantly avoiding. And maybe perhaps I'm just becoming aware of older tendencies of escaping. And I used to go on the phone. I used to go on Instagram all the time. And I was having a realization when we went to Fredericksburg yesterday of remembering there was a point where like I wasn't fazed by nature. Like I would be in the most beautiful, like when we were in Joshua Tree and like we were just sitting out there and I just felt like numb to reality. I felt numb to everything. Like I couldn't feel that connectedness.
That was the transition phase of like you had to stay in that. You had to sit in that.
Right.
And instead, you didn't. And you let that form into the house anxiety at night of being fearful that something was going to happen. And just back to your point, I think it's really interesting of like the difference between sitting through the discomfort like that and the difference between going on social media and trying to find the happiness. It's like the difference between when you have an empty stomach and eating a nutritious meal that is full of hearty protein and hearty veggies and hearty carbs, things that make you feel good and power your body, versus going and getting spoons of sugar and just eating the spoons of sugar. It's like, yeah, one might taste really good and feel really good in the moment, but it's going to leave you feeling like shit and not good. And that's how I think we spend our lives, is that our consumption isn't just what we eat. Our consumption is, how are you spending the 10-minute space you have in between classes, or the 10-minute space while you're commuting home from work? Are you just sitting there? Or are you going on your phone and finding spoonfuls of sugar that are going to make you feel like shit, that you do that so often that you forget the reason you feel like shit all the time is because you're taking a spoonful of sugar in between any space and time that you have, instead of saying, I'm going to have a nice hearty meal that I know is going to make me feel energized and feel good and feel naturally ready to go. So I just think that it's like doing an audit, honestly. Like we like look at like the youngest generation as like, why is mental health on the rise? I don't know. I'm not an expert in this, but like you look at social media and the way that we're talking about it right now of how it can fill the space of where you can feel a discomfort to instead feel synthetic feelings of dopamine. It's like, well,
the way we use social media too.
Yeah, it's the way we use it. Social media is not inherently bad. Social media has changed my life in the most amazing ways by introducing me to people I otherwise would not meet on the street, right? So it goes back again, like I said early in the conversation, it's never inherently the job, the substance, or social media, or whatever it is. It's you and how you're using it. That's all it ever is. So I think to the listener, if you're still here with us, it's questioning of, when you end this podcast, are you going to jump to the next thing that's a distraction? Are you using this podcast as a distraction? I don't know. I hope not. I hope it's a tool, but it's questioning, why am I reaching for my phone? It's questioning, why am I reaching for the brownies in the fridge? It's questioning, why am I doing that? Why can't I just sit with this for 15 minutes and then see what I want to do? Because don't underestimate what sitting with yourself for a few minutes, 10 minutes can do for your decision-making power of just being able to have the powers of discomfort transform into the powers of decisiveness and understanding.
And that gives you the ability to create a life of intention. It gives you the ability to create a life that actually reflects what you want to do and actually reflects who you are, and not just your impulses, not just immediate gratification, not just dopamine hit, but a sustained long life of passion and joy and love. And look, the truth is, it takes time to get there. It takes time to unlearn this shit. It takes time to reprogram your mind and your body to let go, to learn what it means to not be thinking all the time, to learn what it means to live in a state of relaxation. And the journey is not linear. We're gonna find ourselves back in times where we are re-experiencing the emotions, where we're re-experiencing the way we used to live life. But we have to remember, use that like a mirror. Use it as a point of reflection to reflect back to you that you're not living that life that way anymore, and that you do have the choice. You do have the ability to choose. We always have the ability to choose. And it's just remembering, continuously remembering. And that's what this podcast is for. It's for you all who are listening. It's for Daisy and I as this vehicle to literally remember, to just remember. And as we close out this episode, I just want to say thank you to our listeners, genuinely from the bottom of my heart, for giving us the opportunity to curate a space to do this. Because if it wasn't for you guys, we would still probably be talking to the mic, but to be able to grow and continue building this and continue reaching more and more people, to help more people realize they can enjoy life from the inside.
Yeah, I agree with that. And
wow, we gotta. I can't not do the two a week. I need that.
Yeah, it's really helpful. Well, also, with that being said, this is what the community Zoom is for. It's to have these exact convos and just to connect with you guys, because that's where the growth and the perspective shifts happen. So very excited for those community Zooms. Our next one is this evening at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. And we very much look forward to seeing you there. And we have some Patreon updates coming with extra Zooms and things like that, but we'll give a formal introduction to that in Thursday's episode at the beginning of the episode. So stay tuned for that. And we really hope you can make it to our community Zoom this evening. And we'll put the sign up in the show notes below. So hope you can be there. Thanks for being a part of this conversation and being here and listening to this. And as always, let us know what you think.
If you listen to the full hour, let us know. DM us what your thoughts are.
Hour and 20 minutes, Sophie.
Hour and 20 minutes. Okay. Well, we'll do a few edits. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. We hope this conversation was insightful. We hope to allowed you to relax. And we'll talk to you guys on Thursday.